Hi folks. In this tutorial we're going to learn how to analyze articles using a sociological perspective. Sociology is a very important tool that you'll use not only in this course but hopefully in the rest of your life. You've probably been using it already. And what sociology allows us to do is to discern between credible and incredible information. And so we get some tools to put in our toolkit that we can use throughout college, throughout our careers, to help us to understand whether or not what we're reading and seeing is reliable and valid information. Okay, the first thing we're going to learn how to do is to identify the population frame. Now, population frame defined means the entire group, and that's usually people, but it could be, for example, a country or a city or something of that sort. So the entire group to which your research applies and from which you're going to draw a sample. Now, sampling isn't always possible. Sometimes you have a very, very small group that constitutes your population frame. As an example, my population frame may be one kindergarten class, in which case I'm not going to draw a sample. So sampling only happens when you have a population frame that is so big that you couldn't possibly research every single person within that population frame. Let me give you an idea of what I mean here. Now let's say that my research involves a sample of all United States citizens. Could I actually survey, for example, every single person who is a citizen of the United States? No, that's actually an abstract number because people are being born and dying all of the time in the United States, and so I could never get an accurate representation of every single United States citizen. So what I have to do is I have to take a sample. If the United States is my population frame, meaning that every single citizen of the United States has an equal chance of being in my research project, then what I need to do is take a random sample of all U.S. citizens. And I can do that. There are techniques that we have available to us as social science researchers that will allow us to get a sample that represents the population of the United States with regard to racial and ethnic composition, with regard to age, with regard to gender, with regard to urban versus rural environment, and so on and so forth. So it's my job as a researcher, when I determine my population frame, to make sure that I get a representative sample of that entire population. And when I do that, that means that I can generalize my findings. Generalizability. All right, generalizability, another one of those really important research terms, especially when we're dealing with a large population frame from which we want to get a random sample. If we get a good random sample, meaning that if the characteristics of the sample I draw match the characteristics of my population frame, then I can generalize my findings. What I can say is that my findings match the larger population. Now that does not mean that every single person will have the same belief or attitude or feeling about what I'm trying to measure, but it means on average that most of the people in that population will share the same attitude, feeling, or belief. That's a really important thing for you to understand. So in order to determine when you're reading research whether or not the research is representative or can be generalized, you have to know what your population frame is. So you have to be able to pick those things out, and sometimes when you're reading research, especially when you're reading it from just a general type of news article on the internet, that information might be left out. So you're going to need to do some additional work. Now, another important concept when we're talking about population frames and representation is margin of error. Now, I don't want to turn this into a statistics course, but we do have to understand in a basic kind of way the term margin of error. So, all units of a population have an equal chance to be selected if we're going to get a random sample that we can say represents that larger population frame. But, as I said, we know that there's never going to be one exact moment in time when every single unit of a population frame has an equal chance of participating. As I said, some people die, some people are born, people move away, people move in, so there's never a time when we can be absolutely 100% sure that our sample represents the population frame, and that's what causes a margin of error. The margin of error is the amount that your sample varies from your population frame. And so usually that's expressed in terms of a percentage. Generally speaking, it's a plus or minus, and you'll see it when you see statistical information reported. Let me give you an example. So when you see a statistic reported, in this case we're talking about ice cream flavors, you should see something that shows the margin of error. In this case, plus or minus 3.5%. So we say 25% of citizens of the United States state that their favorite ice cream flavor is vanilla, with a margin of error of 3.5%. This means that the actual percentage of citizens could vary from a low of 21.5% to a high of 28.5%. So it's really important for you to be able to identify a margin of error when you're learning about statistics. And so these are things that you're going to have at least a good grasp on at this point to make sure that you can move yourself forward through the semester. All right, let me know what questions you have in the discussion board, and we'll be talking soon. Take care. Bye-bye.